If you want to share your horror stories or audio tapes, you can send them to the email given in the description. Or you can also send them to my WhatsApp mentioned there. Now, let's move on to the horror story. I had always loved the outdoors, so when my friend Mark suggested a weekend camping trip in Blackpine Forest, I agreed without hesitation. The forest was huge, mostly untouched, and known for its thick canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. People rarely camped there anymore, but we didn't care. We wanted quiet, isolation, and a break from city noise. We arrived late in the afternoon, set up our tents near a shallow stream, and started a small fire. Everything felt peaceful at first. The air smelled of pine, the breeze was cool, and the sound of running water made the place feel almost perfect. But as the sun went down, the forest changed. The air grew heavy, still, like something was waiting. Around 10 p.m., we heard the first strange sound. It wasn't an animal cry or rustling leaves. It was a whistle, a long, sharp whistle cutting through the trees. Mark laughed nervously and said it was probably another group of campers, but we hadn't seen a single person all day. The whistle came again, closer this time. I pointed my flashlight into the woods, expecting to see someone. There was nothing but darkness between the trees. We tried to ignore it and went into our tents. I lay awake, listening to every tiny sound. After about an hour, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate steps circling my tent. I whispered Mark's name, but he didn't respond. The steps stopped right behind my tent. I held my breath. Then something slid across the fabric, a hand. I could see the shape of long fingers pressing against the thin material. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. The fingers moved slowly, as if feeling for a way in. The whistle sounded again, right next to my ear, but there was no one inside the tent with me. I finally snapped. I unzipped my tent, jumped out, and pointed my flashlight wildly around. Mark was already outside, pale, shaking, clutching a stick like a weapon. We stood back to back, scanning the dark. That's when I saw it. Between two trees, tall and thin, a figure stood completely still. Its skin was pale like ash, and its arms were too long, hanging almost to its knees. I couldn't see its face, just two dark holes where the eyes should have been. It didn't move, not even when my flashlight hit it directly. Mark whispered that we needed to leave. We grabbed our bags and started walking quickly toward the trail. The forest was silent now. Too silent. No insects, no wind, no water, just our breathing and the feeling that something was walking behind us. When we reached the car, I made the mistake of looking back. The figure was standing at the edge of the tree line, motionless, watching us. As I stared, it tilted its head slowly, almost curiously. We sped out of the forest without speaking. Even now, weeks later, I still hear that whistle sometimes, especially at night. And every time I do, I feel like something is still following me from Blackpine Forest. Let's move on to the next horror story. I moved into my new apartment in Brighton thinking it would finally give me the peace I needed. It was a small third-floor place above an old bookstore, the kind of building with creaking stairs and yellowed windows. The rent was cheap, almost suspiciously cheap, but I convinced myself it was just luck. On the first night, after unpacking, I noticed a faint tapping sound behind the wall of my bedroom. I assumed it was pipes or rats and ignored it. The tapping grew louder over the next few days. Sometimes it sounded like someone knocking, sometimes like nails scratching along wood. When I asked Mr. Collins, the elderly landlord downstairs, he told me the building was old and made strange noises. He smiled too quickly, like he had practiced the answer. That made me uneasy, but I still didn't think much of it. One night, around 2 a.m., the tapping turned into a slow, deliberate thumping. I woke up instantly. The room felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. I pressed my ear against the wall. The thumping stopped. Then, as I was about to back away, a whisper slid through the wall, so faint I almost doubted I heard it. "Let me out." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I stayed still for a full minute before telling myself it must have been a dream or a trick of my tired mind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something in that wall wanted attention. The next morning, I pushed my bed aside and inspected the wall. The wallpaper was torn slightly at one corner, as if someone had scratched it from the other side. I peeled it back a little more and found old, splintered wood beneath it. Something about the texture bothered me. It wasn't just scratched. It was clawed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined fingers digging through wooden boards. Around midnight, the thumping returned, harder this time. I jumped up, grabbed a flashlight, and put my ear to the wall. There was breathing. Slow, heavy breathing, like someone was standing an inch from the other side. "Let me out." This time the whisper was clear, too clear. I stumbled back, knocking over my lamp. The room went dark, except for my shaking flashlight beam. I stared at the wall, expecting it to crack open. Instead, the boards inside began to creak, then bend, like something was pushing forward. I bolted out of the apartment and ran downstairs. Mr. Collins was awake, sitting at the counter of his shop as if he had been waiting. When he saw my face, he sighed. "You heard him, didn't you?" he said calmly. I couldn't even speak. He nodded slowly. Some walls are better left closed, but that room never stays quiet for long. I never went back upstairs. I moved out before sunrise, leaving everything behind. Even now, weeks later, I still hear faint tapping at night, no matter where I sleep. Let's move on to the next horror story. I never believed in hauntings until the night we entered the old Hallister building. My team, the Spectral Eye Ghost Hunters, had filmed in abandoned hospitals, graveyards, and deserted houses, but nothing had ever truly frightened me. When Ethan, our lead investigator, said the Hallister case would be our biggest episode yet, I thought he was exaggerating. The building had been closed for 20 years after a fire, and locals claimed people still heard screams from inside. Perfect material for views, we thought. We arrived just after sunset. The building towered over the street like a black skeleton. Windows shattered, doors boarded, except for one entrance Ethan had forced open earlier. Inside, the air smelled of burnt wood and mold. Our flashlights cut through thick dust, floating like ash. We started recording immediately. Ethan covered the ground floor. Mia monitored EMF readings, and I handled the audio equipment. Every step we took echoed unnaturally, as if the building was hollowed deeper than its structure allowed. On the second floor, Mia called us over. Her EMF meter was spiking wildly near a collapsed doorway. Ethan told me to start an EVP session. I pressed record and asked the usual questions. Is anyone here? Can you give us a sign? At first, there was nothing. But then the temperature around us dropped so quickly, I could see my breath. Mia whispered that something was standing behind me. I turned around slowly, but my flashlight showed only peeling wallpaper and broken tiles. Still, the heavy feeling in the air told me we were not alone. Ethan suggested we move to the basement, the area locals feared the most. The basement stairs were charred and unstable. As we descended, the darkness grew dense, almost physical. Our lights barely reached the walls. The basement was huge, filled with old furniture melted by fire. The silence pressed against my ears. I started recording again. If anyone died here, can you speak to us? I said. A soft voice whispered back, leave. We all froze. It wasn't through the recorder. It was spoken aloud from the far side of the basement. Ethan shouted, asking whoever it was to show themselves. His voice echoed strangely, as if swallowed. Then we heard footsteps, slow, heavy, dragging. They were coming closer. My flashlight flickered, and when it came back on, I saw a figure at the edge of the light. It wasn't fully formed, more like smoke shaped into a person. Its head was tilted, its limbs unnaturally thin, and its face, if it was a face, looked melted, twisted by burns. It took a step toward us, and the sound was like someone crushing charcoal. Mia screamed and ran for the stairs. Ethan followed, pulling me with him. The figure moved faster than anything I've ever seen. The stairs shook violently as we climbed, and I felt something brush my ankle, cold, rough, like burnt fingers. We burst out of the building and didn't stop running until we reached the van. When I looked back, a silhouette stood in the doorway, watching us with that melted face. We quit ghost hunting after that night, but sometimes, when I'm alone, I still hear that whisper in the dark. Leave. Let's move on to the next horror story. I started my night shift at Grayford Manufacturing in early December, a time when the factory felt colder than the winter outside. Most workers preferred the day shift, but I needed the extra pay. The building was old, huge, and mostly automated now. So at night, only 2 guards and 1 operator stayed behind. That week, I was the only operator on duty. The factory floor was a maze of conveyor belts, steel machines, and flickering overhead lights. The hum of the generators echoed through the empty halls. a constant reminder that I was alone. Or at least, I thought I was. Around midnight, I took my usual patrol around Section C, where the oldest machines were kept. As I walked, I noticed something strange. One of the machines, a large industrial cutter, was running, even though I hadn't turned it on. It jerked and screeched like metal grinding bone. I shut it down, assuming a wiring glitch, and made a note to report it. But as I walked away, the cutter started again. I felt a chill down my spine. When I turned back, the machine was vibrating violently, and the safety door was opening and closing on its own. I pulled the power switch to cut electricity to the whole section. The lights flickered out, the machine stopped, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, footsteps echoed behind me. Slow, heavy, not the footsteps of anyone I knew. I turned my flashlight toward the sound, but the beam only caught empty walkways and towering equipment. I radioed the security room. The guard on duty, Terry, sounded annoyed at first, then confused. "I'm looking at all the camera feeds," he said. "Section C is empty. You're the only one there." But I wasn't alone. I could feel it. I moved toward the main corridor, trying to stay calm. Halfway there, a loud bang slammed through the factory, like someone hitting a metal drum with full force. My flashlight shook in my hand. The machines on either side of me began turning on one by one. Conveyors rolling, presses slamming down, drills spinning. All of them were unplugged. I ran. When I reached the assembly line near the center of the factory, I stopped dead in my tracks. A figure stood at the far end. Tall, thin, slouched forward, wearing what looked like an old worker's uniform soaked with oil. Its face was wrong, blurred somehow, like I couldn't focus on it, no matter how hard I tried. It lifted one arm and pointed directly at me. The conveyor belt beneath my feet suddenly jerked to life, dragging me toward the figure. I tried to jump off, but something held my jacket from behind, cold fingers gripping the fabric. I ripped myself free, falling hard onto the floor, and crawled toward the exit. The machines roared, louder and louder. The figure stepped closer, its movements jerky, unnatural, like a glitching animation. I burst through the emergency door and stumbled into the freezing night air. Terry ran toward me from the security office, but all I could do was stare at the factory windows. Something was standing behind the glass, watching. I quit the job that night. But sometimes, when I pass by the old building, I still see that same blurred face staring out from the darkened factory floor. That's all for today. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe. See you guys in the next video.